news from RTV6.
Breaking now, Amos Brown, an Indianapolis icon, Hall of Fame broadcaster, and tireless community activist, has passed away at the age of 64. Sad and shocking news today. Veteran broadcaster Amos Brown, a man who helped shape the city of Indianapolis for decades, collapsed Friday at his family home in Chicago. A family member tells RTV6 Brown died of an apparent heart attack. Amos Brown was a member of the Indiana Broadcasters Hall of Fame. He was referred to as a servant, leader, and a voice of the people, discussing important issues impacting Indianapolis, especially the African-American community, on his weekday radio talk show, Afternoons with Amos. His family tells us arrangements are pending. RTV6 reporter Derek Thomas joins us now. And Derek, as we reflect on the life of Amos Brown, how will he be remembered by you?
He was absolutely the most important voice in this community over the last 40 years. Undisputed. Yeah. When something needed to be done in this community, Amos Brown was a part of it. Now, if he didn't know about it, it probably wasn't happening. If you were a politician and you went on his show, you better bring your A game, right? Because he would hold you accountable. And he took joy in this. I mean, he brought such passion, such energy to his job. I saw him a couple of weeks ago at a news conference, and I always called him, "Hey, Hall of Famer, how you doing?" And he said, "Nothing going on." But he loved this work that he did. And the people who came to hear him or listen to him on the radio show, they were important to him. Right. And he made it his business to speak for them. If there was a question that they thought a politician should answer, then he asked that question. And if they tried to tap dance, they tried to get around it, he again held them accountable.
So everyone may not have always agreed with him, but he sure was respected by them.
Very much so. And I talked about the events that went on. He was always a voice on the United Negro College Fund telethon. And he was there for, I don't know, 20 hours. And they would go to him and he'd say, let's see how much money we raised so far. And that familiar staccato delivery that he had. He was such a good man that you thought he would go on forever. And then I get the news today that he goes down, and it's such a sad day, and we've lost such an important voice. Hopefully there's someone who can step in and pick up the slack.
All right, Derek, thank you so much for sharing your memories. It's appreciated. We continue our breaking news coverage of the death of legendary broadcaster Amos Brown. Ebony Monet is live at the radio station where Brown worked for many years, WTLC AM 1310 The Light, with more about his influential life from the people who knew him best.
Erica, as we speak to people today, they say that they are shocked and saddened by news of Amos Brown's passing. With a career spanning 40 years, he touched so many lives in so many aspects of this city. In fact, he was long known as a champion, an advocate for equal rights and education. He first started with WTLC in 1975, and he became known as a man who asked leaders tough questions. He was also known as a radio warrior, and people counted on his show, Afternoons with Amos, to keep them plugged into what was going on around the Circle City. He was also a longtime columnist for the Indianapolis Recorder. In fact, just moments ago, we spoke to Shannon Williams, the president and general manager of the paper, about this sudden and sad loss.
Just telling it, and he just told it. He was very deliberate with his thoughts and perspectives, and he said things in a very direct way, and very unapologetic about some of the things he wrote about. And some people didn't always agree with some of the things he covered, some of the topics, but I don't think anyone could dispute his passion and heart for the community.
We also spoke to longtime listeners of his radio show, and they say that they tuned in for years and they looked to him for guidance. Now they say there's definitely a void. Erica?
Thank you, Ebony. Amos Brown has had a tremendous impact on politics in Indianapolis and on the leaders in the city for decades. RTV6's Melissa Mahadeo has that part of our team coverage with our Indianapolis This Week political insiders.
And right now, I'm joined by political insiders Laura and Abdul. Thank you both for joining us. First things first, can you kind of react to this news? Of course, all of it just pouring in about Amos Brown's passing.
Well, I was on my way here today, and it was incredibly sad as I drove by Radio 1 to think that his booth will be empty on Monday. I think that for many of us living in a city without Amos Brown, it doesn't seem possible. And I think we're going to miss him on so many levels, personally and professionally. And our hearts go out and our prayers go out to his family and loved ones.
Oh, definitely. Anytime. You cannot deny Amos's impact in the city of Indianapolis. He and I would spar frequently because of our respective political affiliations, but you always knew he was very passionate about the community, that he cared about Indianapolis, and when you went to go interview with Amos, whether Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian, you needed to be prepared because Amos was going to do his homework.
Yeah. What ways do you think he's helped change Indy?
Oh, I think a lot of it is, like I said, once again, just giving a voice to people who did not necessarily have one. I mean, Amos was a voice, for my Democratic friends when they were, in the minority, and even though they'd taken power, Amos would still hold them accountable if he did not think that they were living up, to the promises and expectations of the community. So, those of us who like to consider ourselves in the accountability business, we've lost a partner from that perspective.
He also, though, I think is Indy was his life. I mean, Indianapolis was his life, and he knew so much about the community. I mean, he was a census expert. Congressman Carson called him a scholar today on Twitter, and it was so true because he knew so much more than any of us did. And I think we'll also see a legacy too of a lot of people in journalism, a lot of people in politics, and a lot of people just in daily life. He really lifted up and helped move forward. And I think we're also going to hear a lot of those stories as well.
And so one last question for you. I know you mentioned that sometimes you guys differed in political views, but overall, what I found, respectable man regardless of where the views lied.
Oh yeah, we always had I jokingly tell people our respect for each other walked hand in hand with our get on each other's nerves. We liked each other that much and got on each other's nerves that much, but you don't have that type of healthy respect unless somebody does the homework, is completely committed and dedicated, to the community that they serve, and that, for my former colleague, I always have the utmost respect for.
I've worked in public relations and communications for a number of years, and I had known Amos and worked with him for almost 16 years. And those relationships are relationships you really cherish because you know them, they know you, they know your clients, they know the work you do. And I always knew if I recommended a client go on Amos's show or talk to Amos, they would get a fair shake. And I think that is really one of his lasting legacies.
Says a lot about him.
Yeah.
Thank you both for joining us. Of course, our condolences go out to the Brown family tonight. For right now, though, we'll send it on back to you, Erica.
Thank you. Earlier today, AM 1310 The Light paid tribute to their longtime host, touching on some of the most important lessons Amos Brown taught them and what they often heard people in the community say when they met Amos at events.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for doing this for me. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for making that call. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for following up. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Mr. Brown. That's what, if you were around Amos Brown anytime, that's what you heard. You heard, thank you, Mr. Brown.
Or you heard, Amos, I need you.
Yeah.
Amos, I need your help.
Yeah.
I would hear that a lot. Amos, can I talk to you for a moment?
Absolutely.
And like you said, he always stopped and he always talked. Because through that person's story was a story that he was going to bring to the air to not just help that one person, but to help many.
And we have more reaction tonight on the death of legendary Indianapolis broadcaster Amos Brown. This statement coming in from Indiana Black Expo President Tanya Bell. The board, staff, and members of the Indiana Black Expo are truly saddened by the passing of Amos Brown, a lifetime champion of justice and equality for the African-American community and the underserved. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family, our Radio 1 family, and our entire community. There's a flood of reaction tonight from political leaders around Indiana, many of whom face tough questions from Amos at one time or another. Congressman Andre Carson tweeting, "Rest in peace, my dear friend, mentor, community advocate, and scholar. I will miss you." This from Indianapolis Mayor-elect Joe Hogsett calling Amos Brown a pioneer of journalism, a voice for the voiceless, and a friend. He goes on to say there will only ever be one Amos, and we will miss him dearly. And this just in from Governor Mike Pence, a statement that reads in part, with the passing of Amos Brown, Indiana broadcasting lost a legend and Indianapolis lost a champion. Goes on to say, from his studio and in countless civic causes, Amos Brown worked each and every day to improve the lives of his listeners and better our capital city. We have many, many more statements on our Indianapolis This Week Twitter account, and you can also find those statements and our full coverage on the life and legacy of Amos Brown on the RTV6 app and at theindychannel.com.